My name is David. I'm an alcoholic and just a true alcoholic. I'm going to blow through. I had a very good upbringing. Was given many opportunities. Parents that just celebrated their 56th year of marriage. One sister, older sister by 2 years, who to this day is still my best friend. And I may get a little emotional because she'll pop up a couple times, but she was very part of my sobriety. But my parents moved a lot, settled down in the Pacific Northwest outside of Seattle. During every move, really just never really struggled. Can't really trace anything back to my childhood that said you're an alcoholic because of this experience. My parents did not drink alcoholically. They did enjoy having their wine at times, and they still do. But it never impacted their life or relationships in any manner. My first thought was off in college. I entered a fraternity. I went to college as, I'm going to say, an athlete. I was a golfer. Enrolled, got into a fraternity rather. And fast forward 2 years, my athletic career I'm giving up to pursue a social career with the fraternity. To me, I wasn't being given the opportunities I thought I needed. More will come out from that after college, but my drinking definitely ramped up during the drinking. Graduated with the ability to drink 24 beers in 4 hours and still go out and hit the bars. But to me, the people around me were no different. So I was just normal. The only thing different may have been, one moment, I have 2 fur dogs that need to get outside. I separated my life, looking back on it. I had people who I would go out drinking with on Mondays. I had different people I went drinking with on Tuesdays, on Thursdays, on Fridays, on Saturdays. So in these organizations and groups, it seemed very, even back in my high school years, I always had various groups of friends that did not know much about anybody else. So I could be whoever they wanted to at that time. There was no checking whether there were lies going on or whatnot. But after college, I'll get back quickly to the athletic. I ran into my old coach, and college is over. We had a nice talk, and I brought up that I really felt I should have been traveling with the team, and he flat out told me that he did not trust me to travel based on how much I was drinking. So he did not share that with me then, but he did not. There were some other people on the team who drank heavily. He seemed to feel I was the catalyst. So that's the reason why that part ended. It was kind of an eye-opener, but at the time it didn't mean anything because I'm in my early 20s. Immediately after, I went back up to Seattle, seemed to live just the normal life that all my friends did. We all tended to go to college somewhere, all ended up back in the Seattle area, and we had a kind of a bar nightly routine. Was very fortunate during that time in my whole life that I never experienced any legal issues with alcohol, but definitely felt the physical aspects of alcohol. I started to become, I'm going to say, a seesaw everything I did was all in or all out. I would find myself drinking, and when I drank heavily. That even went back to high school, where the perception of others played a major role in the decisions I made, because I was a people pleaser. I did not want you to think poorly of me. I did not want to get in any kind of trouble. So if I was in town, I rarely drank in high school. If I was out on a cabin in the mountains outside of Seattle, I was the one drinking to pass out. My career was a salesman. I traveled from Alaska to Arizona up through Montana. And throughout my 20s, this was great. I had nobody holding me at home. The money was good. I was 100% commissioned. So if I don't sell, I don't get paid. But I was making enough money to allow me to travel. And in the winter, my skis were on top of the car. I would stop off, ski for the weekend. Summertime, my golf clubs were with me. I would take customers golfing. It became just a nonstop party, but I was always able to get up at 5 a.m. to make the calls back east to the companies I represented. There were no issues at all. And this just continued to go until I was into my late 30s. And by this time, I put on 40 pounds of weight. I walk into the doctors when I'm 40, about to turn 40. And my doctor wasn't present, but his assistant basically gave me a physical, and I walked out with blood pressure medication, cholesterol, blood sugar, everything. Even some of them where I was off the charts. My blood pressure was 187 over 118, I believe it was. And my drinking was a daily evening event. After discussing it with my doctor, he took me off the medications and convinced me, let's look more on your life. So, let me see. I had a good friend who I grew up with who got sober in his 20s, and Brent is his name. He lived in California, but we would talk every maybe 6 months. And after this doctor's appointment, I would end up talking to him. All of a sudden, we're speaking every 3 months, every 2 months. I'm calling him on a weekly basis. And finally, one day, he's like, why are you calling me? And I'm like, I can't stop. I just drink all night long. I was starting to miss meetings. There was an outing I ran for an industry that had a dinner of 450 people. And the last time I ran it, I called out sick at the dinner, which I'm supposed to MC, because I started drinking after golf, and I'm in my room about ready to pass out. And it was easy to say, I got food poisoning. Work continued. Somehow I was still able to make a living, but it was catching up to me. At one point, I stopped filing taxes. I was paying estimated taxes, but I was not filing my returns. And when you avoid those for a few years and all the penalties and interest start coming, all of a sudden you get a nice little bill from the IRS, which I had to settle. I was able to settle that. However, Brent convinced me to go to a meeting. And I gave him the answer, I will tomorrow. And he goes, no, you're going to go tonight. So it's 10 o'clock at night. He ends up calling his dad, who came and picked me up, brought me to my first meeting. I I don't believe I quit drinking immediately, but after walking in that meeting and feeling comfort from what people shared, my drinking was ruined, I will say. It was very difficult to start without hiding it. But I did enter, I started getting a home group. In that home group, it was a 6 a.m. meeting. I attended Monday through Friday religiously, actually started working with a sponsor, working through the steps. Now, this is back in 2010. My sobriety date is June 9th, 2017. So there's a few years of confusion in there, or indecision rather. But I lost one sponsor who decided to go out, never replaced him, just continued to attend meetings. In 2012, I decided to make a career change and a geographical change. And so I moved to Virginia from Seattle. I had about a year and a half of sobriety. Things went well, but I decided to go into a business with my father, who was retiring at the time, and they were living outside of Richmond, Virginia at the time. So I packed up everything with 18 months sobriety, moved to a city I did not know a soul, to immediately open a business. And that lasted well for, I'm going to say, 6 months. I did find another home group. Once again, continued to go Monday through Friday, 6:45 in the morning, and met, but I was attending and then I was leaving early. I knew the faces, I knew the people who shared. I couldn't tell you anything about them outside of the rooms. Was living on my own in a condo, and for some reason, I picked up a drink. So this started the drinking for me again. This time it escalated quickly, and it escalated beyond what I ever drank before. I decided to quit in 2010. It was probably 8 months later where I was drinking during the day. I started to have shakes if I did not drink. My family, my family started to notice it at this time. And they actually had me go see a neurologist because my hands, I couldn't eat comfortably with a fork unless I had alcohol in my system. And I didn't know it at the time, but what it was I was detoxing. I was hiding it in the rooms. I was drinking while attending meetings. The people who I did get to know, they knew I was drinking, but they let me live my own life and come to my own conclusion. So at this time, I ended up asking for help, and I went into an IOP. I did that in Richmond, and didn't have a great experience, I'm going to be honest. It wasn't right for me. It did get me to stop drinking. It did not help me with the long term of stopping drinking, but I went back to my daily meeting routine after completing the IOP, stayed sober throughout the IOP, had no desire to ever go back to drinking. But my AA ritual was go to one meeting a day, leave early for work. I started to do some things outside of the meetings with people. We would have dinners for people's anniversaries. I got to celebrate 1 year and 2 year anniversary with friends in the group. There were friends, AA, if anybody plays golf and you're new, ask questions. Every chapter in every city will have an AA golf tournament. If you have never played golf, show up. They will have it. Everybody's welcoming. You get people who play once every 3 years, and you get some people who play 5 times a day or 5 times a week. But it does not matter. It's the fellowship that matters. Where I relapsed the second time was I drank mouthwash, and I swallowed it. Immediately got a buzz. Went back 5-10 minutes later, got another shot. And that's what it felt like to me. It was a shot. After 2.5 years of not drinking, anything 40 proof will get you. This time it escalated to, I was drinking, getting drunk off mouthwash for 3 weeks. You can, regardless, you can get it. Nobody's ever gonna know. It moved on. Fast forward, within 3 weeks, I'm drinking a handle of vodka a day. I am starting my drinking before I get in the shower. I start drinking before I go into work. I had a 3-block path that I wouldn't drink because I had to pass a police officer's house and his car was always parked there. And then I started drinking during the day. And this continued for about 5 months, 4.5, 5 months. Finally, everything was hitting the walls. An employee of mine who had an ex-husband who was an alcoholic would tell me, you cannot see the customers today. You need to stay in the back. You cannot speak to anyone. You should not even be here, but I can't drive you home right now because of this. I did go see the neurologist, by the way. The neurologist confirmed that it is not the onset of Parkinson's, but the neurologist also never asked me if I drank. My advice to you on that, if taking your sobriety seriously, be upfront with anybody medical. Be upfront about your past. Be upfront if you happen, unfortunately, to ever go out, to tell them so that a clearer picture of what's going on will happen. So here I am drinking alone in the mornings, throughout the day, going home. I stopped going to meetings, and I ended up getting in touch through my sister, a gentleman who he has started, I'm gonna guess 5 different Pavillon facilities in 3 different countries around the world. And Bob was such that he would talk and we would talk, and he's like, well, you think you have a problem? I've had sobriety before, 2.5 years, almost a little over that, not quite 3, but he's like, are you ready to try a different approach? And I wasn't. And we would check in every week and a half, maybe twice a week. And finally, I went to a home group where I asked the guy to be my sponsor. He knew I was drinking, but he said yes. And at the meeting, he gave me an option afterwards that I let him drive me home, or he's going to call the police and I can explain to the police that I have not been drinking. So I chose the get the ride home, and it was Tuesday nights. And that's when I ended up calling the gentleman, Bob. He ended up getting me in Pavillon on that Friday. So pretty much stayed drunk until I got to Pavillon and I detoxed there. But I still have a vivid memory of, let me see, I would have been 43. And no, I'm sorry, 46. And I'm taking the 7-hour drive in the fetal position in the back of my parents' car. And it was tough. And then immediately upon Pavillon, I was thrown into detox for 3 full days before I was, quote, let out to the general population. And I needed it. Could not, even on medication, I could not feed myself. My DTs were so strong. And even during the end, I tried a couple times to escape over a weekend with knowing that I was detoxing at the time, not considering how serious it could be, and just trying to bar myself up in the fetal position until the alcohol could get out of my system. I was never successful at that because the misery and the pain always got too much, and I always went out and got a drink, and it kicked in. But entered Pavillon June 9th, 2017. I did the 6-week program. I did see my attitude change. I got my notes from Pavillon, and I was not a pleasant person the first week or two. I don't know why it changed there, but I was going to be there for 6 weeks, no matter what. I had no desire to go back to drinking. I decided to make the most and get the most out of what I can do there, instead of being a bitter person that I felt like a failure the first 2 weeks. Suddenly, for some reason, that was lifted. And I started putting effort into the projects. Started looking forward to the meditation with Wolf. Started looking forward to the morning yoga. It was no longer, I'm going to say, a competition with anybody, even me. It was a, what can I learn from other people, and just embracing it. And immediately after Pavillon, I not only went back to my home group, which they welcomed me significantly. The gentleman who said he would sponsor me before, after a 2-week debate whether I was done drinking or not, he accepted me back. And for the first at least 8-9 months, I hit my 6:45 a.m. meeting. I still left early to make it to work on time, but I was there, never missed one day in the first year. Also, 5 days a week, I was going to an evening meeting. So I was at least sitting at a minimum 12 meetings a week for the first 10 months outside of treatment. But working with the sponsor, and I had been somebody who had been in the program now for over 7 years, and I had only worked with a sponsor for a month or two at the beginning before they relapsed and went out after 15 years. So the way I view it now is I never worked the steps. I knew a lot of information about them from sitting in all types of meetings. My home group in the mornings is a rotating basis. We read from Living Sober on Mondays, Big Book Tuesdays, the 12 and 12 on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and open discussion, and we read a story from the back on Fridays. So we cover all aspects, but I never worked the steps, so I never looked deep into myself as to why I drank, what changes needed to be made. And by attending meetings alone for me, it was not enough because those old behaviors were just going to resurface. And what happened for me, it was true. The escalation, the first time I got sober, I decided I wanted to. The second time I got sober, I felt I needed to. The third time, I physically and mentally needed to. And that time, it was in less than 6 months to get me in worse shape than it was the first 30 years of my drinking before stepping foot in the rooms. I have successfully worked through the steps, continue to work the steps with my sponsor. He took a very unique approach, I would say. I had no fear. For those that have never worked the steps yet, do not fear the fourth step where you're divulging things. Do not fear the fifth step where you're sharing things. You're doing it with a trusting person. We split it up, and it took 4 days, 4 nights, different nights. So it was never overwhelming at once. But what I got out of that was a clear picture of what I needed to change internally. We had open discussions as to, I mentioned the golf coach earlier. Yeah, he was on my resentment list. And, at the time he should have been. Well, after a discussion, you know what? It was my actions that had that. I viewed the 6th and the 7th step that are read and how it works as action steps. And I did not blow through them. He had me read on page 76, there's the 7-step prayer. It starts with my creator. And he said I could ad-lib it, but it's basically my creator. I'm ready to give you all of me, the good and the bad. I would name off all of my defects of character. And I had to do that 3 times a day and 3 different times a day. If I missed a day, I'd have to start over. So that one step, it took me over 3 months to complete. But the difference was I was willing to actually do the work. It was not, I'm just going to sit there and go through the motions, because I learned going through the motions and sitting my butt in a chair does not keep me sober. Obviously, I am AA-based 12-step program, my recovery. I have met numerous wonderful people. It's quite funny that my address book has gone from 90% non-AA to 90% AA people. I have met judges. I have met prosecutors. The activities you will find, I will guarantee any Saturday or Sunday morning group, they are going to lunch right after. And if you don't know a soul and you just mention that you're free for lunch, you will be invited. If you do not have a dime to your name, you will be invited and lunch will be bought for you. I met some fantastic people, one of which is sitting in the other room, at a river meeting in Richmond. And it was people who paddled. Some people didn't own a paddle, didn't own a kayak, didn't own anything. We got them towed out to this island in the river. We had a meeting on Friday nights out on this island. And fast forward, 4.5 years later, I am now happily living with this woman. She has over 6 years of sobriety. We've got 2 dogs, 2 kids in the house. All of this would not have been possible if I was drinking. And I find it beneficial. We keep each other, the program, active in our lives. We have gotten to know each other's friends in the program. To this day, I still go to 7 meetings a day. During COVID, I was Zooming. I like the in-person meetings personally, but I still do hit some meetings via Zoom. And I've even seen people hit 1 year of sobriety without ever attending an in-person meeting. They're working a program. They're religious about their program. They are following advice and they're taking it seriously. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be sober. And I am going to wrap that up and open it up for any questions.